The observation chamber hummed softly, a womb of sterile light and synthetic air, suspended in orbit above a lifeless moon. Inside, four alien students stood behind a transparent viewing wall, their attention fixed on the figure moving below. He was human, male, mid-30s, encased in a battered orange exosuit smeared with dust and blood. He limped across the uneven terrain of the artificial survival dome, dragging his left leg, shattered in a fall 23 minutes prior, yet pressing on with grim determination. No anesthesia, hissed Vrel, a serpentine scholar with frilled tendrils pulsating around her neck. He should be in shock. He is, replied their instructor calmly, his six-lensed eyes not leaving the human. He simply refuses to act like it. The students fell silent as the human, Sergeant Leo Carter, reached the jagged crevice that had nearly killed him. The fall had been staged, a 20-meter drop designed to mimic a collapsed terrain on a hostile planet. The protocol required subjects to signal for extraction after an injury of this magnitude. Carter had instead screamed once, a raw, guttural sound that sent two students recoiling, then snapped his femur back into place using a metal rod and started climbing. Zintar, whose crystalline skin vibrated with emotional frequency, emitted a low resonance. Why does he continue? This test isn't even real to him. He knows it's a simulation. That's the point, the instructor said. He treats it like it is. Carter's breath fogged the inside of his cracked visor as he crouched behind a rock outcrop, checking the scanner embedded in his wrist. His suit had lost two of its thrusters, and one of the hydraulic limbs was malfunctioning, but he ignored the alerts flashing red. Blood still dripped from a tear in his cheek, running down to the collar where dried plasma had already crusted. He didn't speak. He never did during these tests. His body told the story in torn muscles and scorched nerves, his silence a kind of defiance. His heart rate is elevated but not extreme, observed Coltrane, a gangly being whose skin shimmered with shifting inkblots of data. That level of exertion and trauma should induce cardiac failure in our species, possibly in most. Terran cardiovascular systems are redundantly designed, said the instructor, and Leo Carter's has been stressed to its limits before. Do remember, this one volunteered. He's been through worse. The terrain shifted again, a triggered landslide. Tons of synthetic rock thundered down, filling the dome with deafening sound. Dust obscured the feed. When it cleared, Carter was gone. Vrel let out a disbelieving hiss. That should have killed him. No response came. Only the soft reactivation of tracking sensors. Then, movement. A chunk of debris shifted, and the battered helmet of Carter rose into view. One arm hung useless at his side. The other gripped a metal pipe jammed into a slope, dragging himself up inch by inch. He was laughing. The sound transmitted clearly now, through his reconnected comms. It was not joy. It was that deep, ragged chuckle born of pain and survival pressed together too tightly for anything else to escape. The sound made two of the students flinch, not from volume, but from the sheer alienness of it. Laughter in agony. Triumph through suffering. It didn't compute. He's not responding to incentive, Zintar muttered. Not responding to comfort or aid or even potential death. What does he respond to? Challenge, the instructor said, and the idea that someone, somewhere, thinks he can't win. The dome's simulation altered again. Environmental controls dropped the temperature rapidly. Frost began to cling to the rocks. Carter's suit whined as it tried to compensate for the change, but the coolant damage from the fall rendered its system sluggish. Breath turned to mist. Limbs slowed. Still, he moved forward. In the observation room, the students watched in silence as Carter pulled a broken shard of his own armor from his thigh and used it to cut through a patch of frozen terrain, revealing a storage cache beneath. Inside, a stimpack, a heating module, and a single instruction from the test AI. Proceed to Point Bravo for extraction. He made it, Coltrane said, almost disbelieving. No, corrected the instructor, folding his many hands behind his back. He survived this part. The test continues. Inside the dome, Carter was already standing. His steps were steadier now, boosted by the stimpack, but he remained wary, glancing upward as if expecting the world to attack him again. The dome had thrown everything at him. Fall, poison, structural collapse, cold, and he still moved forward. Vrel turned toward the instructor. Why do they fight like this? with no guarantee, no promise of reward, even with death circling them like carrion. The instructor's voice was quiet but resolute, because they believe it matters, even when it doesn't. Especially then. Down below, Carter reached the ridge marking the test's halfway point. The dome shimmered around him, a final environmental shift. Skies turned dark. Lightning danced across the artificial atmosphere. Acid rain began to fall, eating into the already compromised plates of his armor. He paused only long enough to tear away a panel from his back and use it to shield his exposed arm. Zintar's glow dimmed in what approximated confusion. Why not stop? Just lie down. There is no punishment for failure. He's proven his capabilities. Surely he knows that. He does, the instructor said. But Terrans like him aren't running from failure. They're running through it. Carter pressed onward, one foot in front of the other, until he reached a metallic arch protruding from the ground. Point Bravo. As he passed under it, the environmental threats ceased. The dome stabilized. Simulations ended. A drone descended with medical supplies. Carter didn't reach for them. Instead, he dropped to his knees and removed his helmet. Bloodied, soaked, shaking, but alive. He tilted his face upward, eyes half-lidded, lips cracked into a faint smile. The rain, acid no longer, washed over his face. In the observation deck, silence lingered like mist. Vrel coiled her tendrils tightly. He could have died 10 different times. He almost did, said the instructor. But he didn't. No, the instructor agreed. And that terrifies you, doesn't it? Coltrane gave a stiff nod. It should be impossible. Zintar's frequency trembled faintly. That should have killed you, he whispered, not to the room, but to the man far below. Leo Carter looked up, as if hearing him, and smiled. The chamber lights dimmed as the simulation transitioned. The alien students leaned closer to the glass, expecting another display of physical torment. Instead, the dome below darkened into a faint replica of a human dwelling, small, dimly lit, walls lined with photographs and personal artifacts. There was no visible terrain, no hazards, only a chair, a flickering lamp, and Leo Carter seated silently at the center, out of his armor for the first time. This isn't a survival test, said Zintar, his crystal fractals humming softly. There is no external threat. Incorrect, the instructor replied. You're looking at a psychological stress simulation. For humans, this is often the harder terrain. Vrel narrowed her eyes, her ocular membranes shifting colors. He appears calm. That will change. The dome's environment shifted subtly. The air grew thicker with simulated humidity. The temperature dropped a few degrees. On the wall behind Carter, the photographs began to dissolve into static. The lamp flickered more violently. A sound, barely audible at first, began to creep into the room. Whispers layered beneath whispers, echoing fragments of his own voice, others calling out his name. Carter didn't move. The students watched in silence as one of the walls bloomed with light, replaying a battlefield recording. Bodies sprawled in mud, smoke curling from shattered earth, and Carter kneeling beside a fallen comrade, pressing down on a chest wound with trembling hands. The image hung there, motionless at first, then began to move. It looped, over and over. A heartbeat, a death, a scream. Vrel coiled tighter. It's his memory. Yes, the instructor said, his tone neutral. He's forced to relive it? Yes. He cannot look away. No. The loop fractured. The voices grew louder. Not screams, now, but accusations. His own voice turned against him. You left him. You failed. You lived when he didn't. Carter's breathing changed. He clenched his jaw, eyes fixed on the floor. One hand curled into a fist, blood blooming from his palm, where his nails bit skin. He's breaking, said Coltrane, his face unreadable. No, the instructor replied quietly. He's remembering. The illusion altered again. The walls fell away, replaced by darkness speckled with fire. Another memory, another trauma. Carter stood now, surrounded by towering flame and the silhouettes of running figures. Alarms blared. A child screamed. He turned toward it instinctively, found nothing, turned again, and saw himself. A mirrored projection stared back, hollow-eyed, burned, lips moving soundlessly. Zintar leaned forward. This is cruelty. This is data, the instructor said. But even he watched more closely now. Inside the dome, Carter walked toward the projection of himself. It stepped back. He reached forward. It disappeared. The flames flickered. The screams quieted. A new voice spoke, a woman's this time. Gentle. Come home. The word echoed through the chamber. Carter stopped moving. A tear ran down his cheek, tracing a clean path through the grime. Vrel's voice came softly, almost reverently. That's not pain. No, the instructor said. That's grief. The chair returned. Carter sat again, exhaling slowly, visibly shaking. The simulation no longer assaulted him. It had become him. These weren't weapons. These were memories, cut open and laid bare. And yet, he didn't retreat. He didn't scream. He didn't ask to be released. Zintar turned to the instructor. What is this meant to prove? That he can endure regret? We all feel regret. Not like this, the instructor replied. You feel the loss of logic. He feels the loss of life. Carter raised his head. The room began to rebuild itself. Walls returning, voices fading, photographs slowly reappearing. The cycle completed, and for the first time, the human spoke. Do it again. Vrel recoiled. He asked for more? Carter repeated, louder this time, almost daring the dome. Do it again. And it did. The death, the flames, the voices. Again, again. Each time he broke, but never fully. Each time he cried, but never stopped. Each time he whispered apologies, shouted at ghosts, clawed at the empty air, and still asked for more. He believes suffering is redemptive, Coltrane said. He believes not suffering is betrayal, the instructor corrected. Humans call it survivor's guilt. Most don't survive it. The sequence shifted once more. A new projection appeared, his squad, whole and smiling. Unreal. Impossible. They laughed, raised drinks, welcomed him. Carter stepped forward, hesitant, hand outstretched. The instructor pressed a control, freezing the simulation. Why? Zintar asked. Because this is the moment, the instructor said. The moment when he chooses illusion or truth. The students leaned in. The simulation resumed. Carter's hand trembled. His breath hitched. Then he lowered it. He turned away from the fantasy. The room collapsed again. Reality surged back in. The dome returned to its neutral state. Carter stood, silent, pale. In simulation, he said. The instructor complied. Inside the chamber, the door hissed open. Carter stepped out, eyes distant, legs unsteady. He passed by the viewing glass, never looking in, unaware, or perhaps uncaring, that he had been watched. The students stood silent. Zintar's fractals pulsed softly. He faced it willingly. Yes, the instructor said. He broke, and still chose to continue. Coltrane looked away, uneasy. They terrify me. They should. Vrel's gaze lingered on the spot where Carter had stood. That pain wasn't from this dome. It was from before. From years ago. Correct, the instructor said. And he keeps it with him. Yes. Why? To remember what he lost, the instructor said. And what it cost to keep going. No one spoke. The simulation was over. But the lesson had only begun. The final phase of the observation was to be conducted in real time, outside of simulation, an unscripted encounter. The students were uneasy. For 2 sessions, they had witnessed extremes of physical and emotional resilience in Leo Carter. Now, they were to meet him face to face. No glass, no data filters, just presence. Zintar stood slightly apart from the others, the light within his crystalline frame pulsing at irregular intervals. He had never been this close to a Terran before, and certainly not one who had endured such brutal tests with eyes still sharp and spirit unbroken. Vrel shifted restlessly, her serpentine body coiling tighter in anticipation. What if he sees us as enemies? He won't, said the instructor, who now wore a more formal configuration, dark ceremonial plating and the soft violet shimmer of a species that had witnessed too much. He knows this is observation, not captivity. The airlock opened. Leo Carter entered. There was nothing extraordinary about his appearance anymore. No armor, no weapon, just a loose standard station uniform and the shadow of old wounds in the way he walked. He was taller than they expected, leaner, the skin around his eyes lined with fatigue that sleep could never mend. Yet something in the way he carried himself demanded attention, not through force, but through a strange, unyielding stillness. He looked at them one by one, not judging, not afraid, just observing. So, he said, voice low and even. You've been watching. Yes, Zintar responded, voice layered with shifting harmonic tones. We were tasked with understanding human durability. Leo smiled faintly, and Vrel uncoiled slightly. You should not be standing. The fall, the cold, the pain, psychic and otherwise. We designed the scenarios to break the unbreakable. And yet here I am, Leo replied, stepping closer, not confrontational, but deliberate. What are you trying to understand? My biology? My stubbornness? Your motive? Coltrane answered, voice quieter than usual. We can measure physical limits. But what drives you when you know there's nothing waiting on the other side? No prize. No salvation. Leo paused, as though weighing how much truth to give. Then he looked toward the nearest observation wall, at the reflection of himself framed by alien eyes. Because I owe them, he said. All of them. You're fallen. Zintar asked. Leo nodded. Friends. Brothers. Civilians. People I couldn't save. Every breath I take after theirs is a kind of debt, and I'll never repay it. The words hung there, heavy and unflinching. The students had no framework for this kind of compulsion, not logic-bound or chemically induced. Something older, more primal. Vrel studied him with a gaze that dissected, not out of cruelty, but fascination. But the war is over. Your species declared peace 5 years ago. You've already served beyond obligation. Leo gave a bitter chuckle. Peace is just a pause in the dying. We find new reasons, new battlegrounds. Out there, he gestured toward the stars beyond the dome. Someone's always in trouble, always one step from losing everything. Coltrane's expression dimmed. So you fight for those you haven't met? For those who can't fight for themselves, Leo said. And for the ghosts that never left. A silence fell, deeper than before. Not awkward, reverent. Then the instructor approached, bowing his head slightly. Mr. Carter, would you consent to a final demonstration? Not a test. A conversation. Leo raised an eyebrow. That's what I thought this was. A different kind, the instructor said. He gestured, and the walls of the chamber shimmered away, revealing a ringed planet spinning slowly in orbit, far below. The group was alone now, in a suspended platform above the void. The instructor continued. You see, this program, it was never about proving how much pain a human could endure. It was about understanding why they choose to endure it. And now, our students must decide if they're ready to confront that same choice. Leo looked at each of the students again. You want to put them through it? No, said the instructor. We want them to decide if it's worth it. Zintar stepped forward. To become like you? Leo shook his head. No, never like me. But maybe strong enough to carry what I carry. For someone else's sake. The platform went silent. The stars spun slowly around them. Then Coltrane asked, what if we say no? What if we say it's too much? Leo didn't hesitate. Then you're not ready. And that's fine. Most people aren't. But someday, you'll see someone who is, someone burning just to keep one other person warm. And maybe you'll understand then. And maybe that'll be enough. Zintar's frame shimmered faintly, like frost melting in the sun. You are not what I expected. I hope not, Leo said. Expectations are the first thing to die in war. Vrel straightened, her posture now more composed, almost respectful. What happens now? Leo looked out at the stars. Now you choose. Who you want to be, what you're willing to stand for, and whether you want to be a witness or a protector. The air around them shifted as the observation platform began to lower, returning to the facility. No one spoke on the descent. As they reached the floor, the students disembarked one by one, quiet, thoughtful, not shaken, changed. Leo Carter stood alone for a moment longer. He closed his eyes. Somewhere, behind his lids, the screams echoed still. But when he opened them, it was not despair that looked out. It was resolve, and it was unbreakable.